Each day, your church is born. Wow. Church is changing, isn't it? In truth, it's always changing. And my colleagues' lovely reading here is evidence of that. But I feel like we're in a time of bigger changes now. And there have been these times in history. How do I know church is changing and has always been changing? Well, if it hadn't been always changing, we'd all still be worshiping the way we were back in the first century. And we're not. Things are always evolving. And there have been big momentous changes. I don't know if we're in the midst of a reformation. I don't know that this is like the 16th century, but we're in the midst of a big shift. Some of you have commented to me about being worried about lower attendance. Attendance is dropping, there aren't as many people connecting as there were at the beginning of the pandemic, and that's true. And the thing I want to tell you is that's true everywhere. That's not just true for UUCLV. It's not just true for Unitarian Universalists. It's true across the board. It's true for every denomination everywhere. It's not just true online. It's true for religious communities that are gathering in person. Church is changing. It was changing before the pandemic, but the pandemic has probably put things into higher gear. And this has left the church-going faithful, I think, feeling very uncomfortable. What are we going to do? How are we going to get people back? The thing is, maybe we're asking the wrong questions. Maybe it's not about getting people back into church on Sunday mornings. Maybe we have to ask ourselves, what is our mission calling us to do in the world? Now, in seminaries, there are whole classes and discussions and workshops and seminars about the changing landscape of American religion. And in some of those classes and seminars and discussions and workshops, there are people talk about things that you can do to be more appealing, how to pep up your music and how to be more appealing to young people, but really, the big question is, what are people hungry for? People don't really want to get out of bed on Sunday morning just because there's a praise band instead of a piano or an organ. What is church calling people to do? How do we want to meet that challenge? Well, that's the big question. How do we want to meet the challenge of our mission? Our mission to awaken the spirit, connect in kindness, and help to heal the world tells us that we have work to do inside, but also out there. So what does that mean for the folks who are still coming in and for the future folks who are coming in? Because I have to tell you that we're still getting new folks. We're still getting visitors and new people. What does that mean for the folks who are coming in? And what does that mean for meeting our mission out in the world? How do we want to meet that challenge? What does your ideal church look like? Now, I have to tell you that once upon a time, my ideal church, my personal ideal church, this was a long time ago, looked like a very traditional church with big stone walls and an organ and, oh, all the bells and whistles and lots of candles and lots of traditional hymns and lots of. The thing is, I was really missing the point. I was really missing the point because those are all trappings, window dressings. Oh, they're pretty. They look nice. But without the substance underneath, it's just a museum. It's just a museum. So when I ask you, what does your ideal church look like? I don't mean what kind of architecture does it have? Not exactly. I don't mean, does it have stained glass or not? I don't mean, does it have an organ or a piano? I mean, what does it look like when it's doing the work it does? What does it look like if you take the whole building away? What does it look like to the rest of the world? Why do we come together? How do we come together? Now, a very sharp and smart United Church of Christ minister, Reverend Lillian Daniel, she wrote a piece, an article in the Christian Century, and that became a book, When Spiritual but Not Religious is Not Enough, in which she talked about how the SBNR, the spiritual but not religious folks, would frequently tell her when folks found out she was a minister, oh, I'm spiritual but not religious, and go on to her about how much they didn't like religion and how they found God in sunsets and long walks on the beach. And she talked a little bit about how she didn't go on at math teachers or history teachers about how much that wasn't important to her in her life. And further, that's great as far as it goes for your own individual inspiring experience, and as long as everything's going great. But what about for doing work in the world? What about the reasons that we come together? What about when things aren't all hunky-dory? What about for going deeper and really learning? So why do we come together? Right? Why and how do we come together? These are important questions in considering what our ideal church looks like. When I ask you that, I'm asking, who is present? Who is in leadership? What kind of work are we doing in the world? Whose voices are we amplifying? Where are we allies? These are important questions to consider as we consider what our next steps are going to be. We've already taken a massive step in selling a building and in choosing to rent space from a senior center in Allentown. Very exciting. What do you want to do with those decisions? So I'm going to ask you to think about that. And we're going to put in the chat an answer garden. What is your vision? Don't reply in the chat. If you reply in the chat, it's not going to be part of our word cloud. Click on the link in the chat. And what's your one word vision, or one phrase vision, a couple of words for UUCLV? What is your vision for us in the future? What do you see as our future? And we're going to share the answer at the end of the service. The question is, what is your one-word vision for UUCLV? And you have 20 characters to write your answer in that word cloud. Now, maybe your answer is, we should have supper church. Do you know what supper church is? That's where we gather over a meal, usually an evening meal. But people don't bring it from home. We cook it together. That's part of the experience. Maybe that's what you think we ought to be. Maybe your answer is, my vision is that we partnered with another religious community or another community. So partnering, that we do work together. Maybe your answer is out in the community. Maybe your answer is after school program. I don't know. But I would love to see what your vision is, what your hopes are for the future of UUCLV. What do you think? What will we look like as an ideal church in the future? Maybe your answer is a full-time DRE, a full-time music director. Maybe you want a church and community chorus. I don't know. I want you to think big and think outside the box and share in the answer garden. Now, when we're dreaming big, of course, it doesn't mean that we're going to implement every idea that every single person has. When we're brainstorming, we can't do that. But no idea is too outlandish to put into the conversation. But let me tell you that dreaming and thinking outside the box is what will keep a community thriving. I know it can be scary to look at numbers and to feel as though it's never going to be the same again. It is never going to be the same again. But that doesn't mean it won't be something new and wonderful in the future. How do I know it's going to be new and wonderful? Because I know that you are wonderful. You can build it. Dream big, my beloveds. Make your vision a reality.